The main menu's layout was inspired by games such as God of War and The Witcher 3, which uses a clear and organized UI design, while showing off the game in the background. Following Jacob's law, using a design or layout from a popular game enhances navigation, usability, and overall experience, as players have already grown accustomed to this type of design in previous experiences. This menu holds three options: New Game, Controls, and Exit Game. These buttons adopt logic from Law of Pragnanz by using a linear format, symmetry with the button design, and simple wording. Using this method aids the player's understanding, making it easier for the player to break down each button and work out their purpose. The button's appearance remains consistent for every button on each screen, which, according to the law of similarity, the player will be able to perceive the shape or design as related, therefore sharing a common meaning or functionality. On selecting the control button, a pop-up will appear showing each key and their function within a scrollable area, allowing the player to break down and understand each of the player's controls. This pop-up also allows the player to adjust the screen's resolution to match their preference within the drop-down menu. The close button simply allows the player to close the window and return to the main menu screen. On selecting the Exit Game button, another pop-up will appear asking the player if they are sure they want to quit the game. The purpose of this pop-up is to act as a safety net in case players accidentally choose the Exit Game button, since misclicking an option, especially a button which closes the game, can cause frustration for the player. Finally, the New Game button will take the player to the next scene, the character selection screen. Like the menu screen, the character selection screen adopts logic from Jacob's law, using an existing games design, in this case Call of Duty, to increase user familiarity and a better understanding of the UI's functionality. As the screen includes multiple choices and inputs required by the player, reducing the amount of options on screen by organizing them appropriately would be important, since Miller's law suggests doing so will reduce cognitive load, preventing the player from becoming overwhelmed with different options on the screen. The character icons are simply buttons to help the player confirm their choice. Initially starting with a lower contrast, then when hovering over, the options image becomes clearer and brighter. Then a yellow glow is used to confirm the player's selection. In terms of character availability, this is signified through the use of the padlock icon. If the character has a padlock, it is unavailable. If no padlock is present, the character can be chosen. The name input is a simple input where the player can choose the name they desire. This will then be saved and displayed in the end screen along with the player's score. The two buttons below, Back and Confirm, describe a simple action the player can do. The Back button will simply take the player back to the main menu, and the Confirm button confirms the player's character choice and name input and brings them into the game. The Confirm button, however, has two states, enabled and disabled. The button can only be enabled if the player has entered at least one character in the name input and has selected an available character in the options on the left. If the player hasn't done either or even one of these two inputs, the button is disabled, preventing the player from proceeding. On entering the game, the player spawns on the dock of the village. In front of the player is a scroll, which, when collected, presents an initial pop-up asking if the player wishes to view the tutorial. This pop-up, I believe, makes the game more user-friendly. Instead of forcing every player to view the tutorial, they now have a choice. So new players can choose yes, to view and read the tutorial to better understand the game and their objective, while experienced players with better understanding can simply select no to proceed with the game. There's also a tick box, which players can choose to prevent this pop-up appearing every time they collect a scroll from the start of the game. On selecting yes, the tutorial screen will then appear. The player is presented with a brief background to their character and what their main goal is, along with their main obstacle. In this case, the player's health will go down over time. The screen will also present each collectible as an image, with a brief statement outlining the collectible's value, all of which contained within a scrollable area. The use of images to describe each element aligns with Law of Pragnanz, which explains how people process visual elements better than complex figures, therefore providing a simpler way to identify the collectibles in a level and connect to their individual value allows for better understanding and processing speed. Their overall score is displayed in the bottom right, while the player's health, stamina, and location in the minimap are positioned on the bottom left. Following logic from the law of proximity, I found grouping health, stamina, and player position together suitable, as this relates to the player's state, while keeping the score completely separate as this presents the player's progress. In doing so, this helps the player understand a relationship with certain groups of UI with each other, making information more efficient. In terms of UI behavior, the minimap follows the player from the top-down view camera. I included a player icon to identify the direction the player is facing, as well as icons above each of the collectibles, with separate colors representing each type, as well as the health collectibles. I believed adding a minimap would aid the player in finding each collectible, as they become highlighted on the minimap once they get in close proximity. The stamina bar provides a limit for how long the player can sprint for. Once the sprint bar reaches 0, the sprint function is disabled until the stamina bar refills back to 100. The stamina bar will only start to refill when it reaches 0. Only when the stamina reaches 100, the ability to sprint will become available to the player again. I added this element since I believed it added a tactical element to the game, making the player decide when best to use the sprint function. The health bar is linked to the player's overall health. Since the game objective is to collect as many points as possible before the health reaches 0, the player needs a clear display on how much health they have left. The health bar will continuously tick down to 0, but with a collection of health collectibles, this can increase the amount of health based on the health's collectible value. There are 3 types of health collectibles overall, all giving varying levels of health increase, but only one of each type are present on the level itself. Every 30 seconds they will move to a new location on the map. If the player collects one of them, however, it will despawn and respawn after 30 seconds. It will then continue the cycle of moving to a new location every 30 seconds. Once the player collects a collectible, they are presented with further heads-up display elements, one of which displays the value of that collectible. According to Miller's law, reminding the player of information reduces cognitive load. Since the player won't have to remember each value of each collectible, the heads-up display elements will simply remind them every time they collect a collectible. The second heads-up display element that appears is the collectible counter, which tallies how many of each collectible you have collected. Temporary appearance of the counter again aligns with Miller's law. Since the overall goal is to collect as many points as possible, not collectibles, the collectible counter could be deemed unnecessary to the overall goal. So to reduce cognitive load, the counter is kept out of view so the player can focus on the primary goal. The player also has the ability to pause the game using the escape key. This pause menu design follows the law of similarity, providing consistency of design and visual elements, which gives a sense of unity and balance, resulting in more aesthetic appeal. This also helps the player recognize the purpose of the menu as the holder for multiple abilities and functions. The resume button simply returns the player to the game, carrying on from where they left off. The restart button resets the scene to its beginning state, putting both the overall score and the collectible counters back to 0, allowing the player to restart from scratch. The controls button is the same as that from the main menu, giving the player the chance to view the key inputs and their actions, as well as adjusting the resolution of the screen during play. I felt having this option available during gameplay satisfies the player, as it saves them from going all the way back to the main menu to adjust the screen, therefore losing all progress. The tutorial button allows the player to revisit the tutorial screen if they wish. Having this ability I felt would benefit the player's understanding of the game. If they accidentally selected no when asked at the start if they wish to see the tutorial, they have another chance to view the tutorials through the pause menu. Finally, the main menu button returns the player to the main menu. All of these buttons allow flexibility and support for the player, allowing them to learn more about the game or to return to previous screens whenever they please. The end screen is presented when the player's health reaches 0. This layout design continues to draw similarities from the main menu and pause menu, again using the law of similarity to keep all scene designs and elements as consistent as possible to enhance player understanding and functionality of the designs. The name they entered in the character selection screen is displayed, along with the score and collectibles count they achieved during the previous game attempt. This screen will also display the highest score achieved in the game. The score is displayed by saving the overall score data from the gameplay. Once the scene changes, the scene script saves the data, then links to the text elements to display the final value. The high score records the highest score achieved overall. If the player doesn't match or beat the value, the high score value remains the same. If the player exceeds that value, the high score is updated to display the new highest points value achieved. The collectibles count uses a similar method to the overall score display, but this time I adopted the Zeigarnik effect, which informs players whether they have completed the task fully or not. In this case, I display the total number of collectibles available in the level. This will inform the player if they haven't collected all available collectibles, therefore encouraging them to try again to collect everything. I felt this gave the player a secondary objective to the original, therefore giving them more purpose to play. At the bottom of the screen are 2 options for the player: the main menu, which allows the player to try again, or the exit game button, which, like the previous exit game button, first checks if you wanted to quit the game and will do so once the player clicks yes. This time these 2 buttons contain imagery to symbolize what each option will do, since the law of Pragnanz explains the use of symbols or imagery alongside text would enhance player understanding. Since the previous menus had the buttons laid out in a vertical fashion, the end menu displays the buttons horizontally, so to prevent player confusion, the imagery is used to help the player quickly identify which button does which function.